You may see a pop-up screen that comes up. Just click on Got It. All right. Again, today is an overview of reporting. We will cover it in 2 steps. The first is a general kind of reporting overview. It will cover topics, all the topics pertaining to reporting, which includes SurveyMonkey Apply, our technical assistance webpage, reporting schedule, the narrative report and budget narrative, and expenditure report, and EGMS claims. Then the next section will be on the community investment data reporting. We'll cover the why of data reporting, important concepts, and then I'll demo some data entry with the actual data report. And again, the Q&A is not recorded. Having trouble getting the slides to advance. So welcome everyone. We'll take this opportunity for Youth Development Oregon or YDO staff to introduce themselves. And also here on, I'll draw notice in the chat, there should be or will be a link to the PowerPoint. If you have the capability of maybe double screens or opening it up, you're welcome to do that and follow along. One of the handy things about that is that there are numerous links within the PowerPoint itself that you can follow, and that way we can save having to repeatedly enter links into the chat. They're all there in the PowerPoint. So please do follow along if you'd like. And I'll start off introductions. My name's Bill Hansel. I'm a grant manager and data lead, and I will pass it to Abraham.
Hello, I'm Abraham Aganya. I'm a grant manager and process analyst with YDO. I'll go ahead and pass it to Paul.
Good morning. My name is Paul, so I'm an associate director here at Youth Development Oregon, and I'll be the person monitoring chat behind the scenes. So please feel free just to add that as we go in, and I'll pass it over to our director, Brian.
Thanks so much, Paul. Yeah, Brian Duttman, Youth Development Director. Just appreciate all the work that staff are doing to put this training together, and appreciate everybody, all your grantee and other sort of participation in this. We really appreciate you taking the time, and I know that things are a little delayed, but we're all doing our best. So just appreciate your patience and all the great work you're doing in communities. I will pass it to Tanisha.
Thanks, Brian. My name is Tanisha Bishop. I am the Youth Grants Administrative Specialist. I'm here behind the scenes. Yeah, that's me, and I'll pass it to Molly.
Good morning, Molly Burns. I'm a grant manager and re-engagement analyst, and I think that leaves Jared.
Good morning, I'm Jared Shaw. I'm a grant manager and workforce analyst, and I think that might be all the staff on the call. Am I right?
Yes, thank you, YDO staff. And I just want to say, in addition to Brian being our director and all of that entails, he's also a grant manager. So the first one in history. So we look forward to that. And some of you may be lucky enough to have him as your grant manager as well. The staff directory on this slide is linked. It will take you to a page that shows every YDO staff. I would draw your attention to a couple other names. Cord Bucher may not be able to join us this morning, and he is also a grant manager. And Sally Deck is also a grant manager and won't be here this morning. So if they're your grant managers, or you just need to get in contact with anybody, you can follow the link there that in addition to the grant managers, there will be support staff and actually every staff that works for Youth Development Oregon.
Hey, Bill, real quick, just before we get going, just to let people know, we are recording it. So if you want to stay on camera, it's totally fine. But if you also want to go while we're doing the recording section and not be on camera, we understand and support you either way.
At this time, as we begin the overview of reporting, I will turn it over to my colleague, Abraham.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and kind of go give you an overview of what reporting is going to kind of look like. First, we're going to start off with what SMA or SM Apply is, or SurveyMonkey Apply. That's the platform we use for all our reporting having to do with the CI grant. There's kind of the website. You can click on that. But there's a few things I kind of want to bring your attention to in regards to the different kind of settings, if you will. We have an owner status, and I kind of have in quotation marks. The owner is really the person that has the authorization to submit the quarterly reports. And then we have something in SMA called collaborators. Those are the people who can also add or edit information in the reporting platform. You know, and the reporting platform really consists of the narrative report, budget narrative, as well as you'll see links in SM Apply to fill out your expenditure report and your data report. And like I said, we'll cover a little more in detail what the data report is, and expenditure report will be done, I believe, this Friday, actually. But something that also has to be done is that formal request for funding, which is what we call the EGMS claim. And EGMS is the electronic grant management system that the Department of Education uses. And that's where the formal request for funding actually happens. And that's external to SMA. Next slide. Something else, most of the information you're going to see here, if not all of it actually, is going to be in our TA webpage, our technical assistance website, which is on our regular website. And there's a specific on the headings, if you look for CI, community investments, in the drop down there, something will say CI technical assistance. And you will find links and resources there to a lot of the information that will be covered here, as well as eventually this PowerPoint presentation or a link to this presentation and this training video. Like I said, there'll be also a link to the EGMS homepage. You can find resources on how to use EGMS if you're not familiar with it or if you've never used it. PDFs of reporting schedule, deadlines, and that's going to be with a caveat. As you know, there's been delays, so some of that may be we're looking possibly to go ahead and adjust those things because, like I said, there have been some delays. So there's an email I believe that was sent out last week about that actually. There'll be an example of a narrative report that's currently on there on the website, as well as currently an example of an expenditure report. And like I mentioned, we will be having a training there on the 29th for the expenditure report. And it's a good idea. If anything does change in regards to reporting or any documents or any sort of process change, it'll be documented in our technical assistance page. It's always a good idea every now and then check on it, maybe for every quarter reporting, just to take a look as if anything has changed. And usually we'll also send an email, but sometimes things happen, something may be missed. So it's a very good idea to every now and just check into the technical assistance page. And there's one for each specific type of grant. Narrative report and the budget narrative. So those two things are now going to be submitted in the SMA, but the narrative report now, which is a little different from previous years and past, that's going to be done every 2 quarters. You're not doing it every quarter. So as you see, there'll be 2, 4, and 6, and 8. But something that we also have now that we didn't have before in SMA reporting is the budget narrative, which is now required every quarter as well. That wasn't done. That wasn't the case in the past, but now it is. And again, there's links right there on the bottom where you can access what those look like. Next slide, please. The reporting schedule, like I mentioned, there's been delays. So if you go to our website, our technical assistance website right now, you'll see what the deadlines are. But knowing, like I said, we have delays, those are probably going to change or be altered. We will work with our grantees to make sure that they're not penalized in any sort of way, you know, as a matter of fact, regard to the deadlines, but not especially these first quarter deadlines. I mean, a lot of you have not yet signed your agreement, so. But there's some of the guidelines there. They're due the last day of the month following the quarter's end. The quarterly reports, expenditure, data, budget narrative, and EGMS claim Like I mentioned before, those are all done except for the EGMS claim in SMA. The EGMS claim's done in the EGMS system. And then we have something called the biannual narrative report, basically the narrative report that happens every 2 quarters, 2, 4, 6, and 8. And then the expenditure report, again, there's information for when we're going to have the training there. There will be an SMA that gets completed quarterly. Again, there's links there to where you can find examples of the expenditure report and the EGMS claim. This we ask that to be submitted at the same time as quarterly reporting, for quarterly reporting to be considered complete, or if you will, for us to be able to actually begin the review process. If you do not have all the reports and your EGMS claim, your review of your reports and EGMS claim will not be complete. We usually wait for all of those things to be submitted at the same time before we can completely review your reporting and the claim and begin that process, if everything's approved, to get the claims and the funding processed and released. So just to kind of give you a heads up, we review the reports and everything in the order that we get them. So just to let you know, again, there's a link there to the EGMS site where you can get more information. With that, I'll go ahead and pass it to Bill to cover some the data reporting there.
Thank you, Abraham. The rest of this training will focus specifically on the data report, as this Friday will be a separate training for the expenditure report. The why of reporting really comes down to the data collection comes down to reporting and informing. The why is reporting grantee work and impact and evidence of project work and meeting grant requirements. So there's, at one level, it's a requirement, but it really does inform our work and helps us gauge impact. We compile data annually, and then as the biennium total, and that data is shared with our council, the Youth Development Council. We use it in presentations to the Oregon legislature. That's really important. As like this biennium, we had so many applications, far exceeding the amount of funds that we have. And so as we show data, it's used to advance policies and ultimately increased funding. Our goal with the data report is to better understand the youth population served and the impact of programming for continuous improvement. The data report itself is an online Excel workbook that is used to submit individual level data pertaining to the youth served by a grantee with grant funds. That's an important piece of this. An agency or organization may serve a lot of youth. The data reporting is the individuals that are served with grant funds. Grantees are provided with a link to the data report by the grant manager, and the same link is provided in SurveyMonkey Apply. So this is a cloud document and it's linked, and you'll be able to access it via that link, both in SMA or via just the link that you have saved. And it is recommended that you save that link so that you can access it, the data report at any time if you would like to, not just during the reporting window. My advance button is very tricky. Data reporting. This is my favorite slide in the whole deck, and it's because of its simplicity. Data reporting for each quarter can be reduced to these steps and in the following order. Every quarter, this process will unfold, and you start off by entering youth that started receiving grant-funded services in the reporting period. And after that is done, The process is called end dating, and you assign an end date to any youth that may have stopped receiving grant-funded services in the reporting period. This is the process that's applied to every quarter's reporting. So this shows you just how simple it is when it's reduced. It's a bit more complex, but in terms of just entering it into the spreadsheet, but it really is, if you follow these two and in that order, you'll complete the data reporting. Now we're going to cover some important concepts. The first of important concept to grasp is the data report is cumulative. This means that a single data report is used for all reporting periods. There are 8 reporting periods or quarters in the biennium, and the data report may be referred to as Q1 data report or the Q2 data report, so on and so on through Q8. What's important to note that even though it may be referred to as a specific quarter's data report, it's a single workbook. And that, again, as a cumulative report means that it's added to, never deleted or copied over. The next important concept is what rows represent. Each row in the data report represents a period of service. A single youth may have multiple rows or periods of service during the biennium. The period of service is determined by start and end dates. Therefore, all start and end dates must fall within the 23-25 biennium, which runs from 7/1/23 through 6/30/25. The start date is the date the youth began receiving grant-funded services. The end date is the date the youth stopped receiving grant-funded services. And assigning an end date is known as end dating. So if you hear me reference end dating, that's the process of assigning an end date. These things will go into more detail when I actually demo data entry into the data report. But for now, these are concepts again. The next concept is youth ID. A single unique youth ID is used for each youth. The same youth ID is used for youth that has multiple periods of service during the biennium. Do not use multiple youth IDs for a single youth. So one youth, one ID. A youth is considered to be active in grant-funded services if their associated row does not have an end date. A youth is considered to be inactive in grant-funded services if their associated row has an end date. This is important just in terms of the lingo. So an active youth has not left the program, and an inactive youth has stopped receiving services. The next concept is the annual data reports. And really the annual data reports are also the Q4 and Q8 data reports. So the Q4 and Q8 data reports are also the year 1 and year 2 annual data reports. The primary difference between the annual data reports and the quarterly data reports is that after entering youth that started receiving grant-funded services and assigning an end date to all youth that stopped receiving grant-funded services during Q4 and Q8, only active youth will remain. And here's the step that makes it unique. In Q4 and Q8, all active youth after the first 2 steps have been applied will be assigned an end date. That is the last day of Q4, 6/30/24, or Q8, which is 6/30/25, for all remaining active youth, and populate the required education and employment status end fields. Anytime a youth is end dated, the sections that is the employment and education status at end needs to be filled out. Now, here we're moving away from the important concepts to just some general guidance. Before doing any of the following, please reach out to your grant manager first. Failure to do so may result in the data report not being approved. Deleting approved data. Do not delete approved data. So as the report is cumulative, it's very important to preserve what has been approved. So do not delete data. In the same fashion, copying over approved data, don't do that either. Do not copy over or change approved data. Altering the template, again, do not alter the data reporting template. It's important because at a later stage, all of the data reports for every CI grant, which is over 100, I believe, will be combined together. And that's why we need to, it's important to protect the integrity of the data report itself. So adding a column, otherwise disabling the drop-down menus, different things like that will complicate the process of merging all of the data for our year-end data report. So please don't alter the data reporting template. Entering data that is not provided in a drop-down menu. So virtually every cell besides the youth ID and the every column besides youth ID and the date columns, date of birth and start and end dates have drop-down menus, and please use those options. The cells will allow you in many instances to override the drop-down, which means you could conceivably type anything you want into the cell. Our ask is that you don't, and you restrict your entries to the drop-down menu options. Leaving a required field blank. The required data fields require that to enter data into all the required data fields. Another piece of general guidance, and this is very important and will save a lot of potential headaches and issues, and that is we understand that there will be a lot of copying and pasting likely between an outside data source or spreadsheet or however an organization may collect their data and then transferring it into the data report. We welcome that type of copying and pasting, but what we ask is that you use the paste values option, or also known as the 1, 2, 3 clipboard option. You can see here on this screenshot, the paste values has the clipboard in the 1, 2, 3. And what this does is that it strips any formatting and formulas that were captured when copying the data, and it will prevent numerous potential issues, such as changing fonts, colors, cell size. Sometimes not using the paste 1, 2, 3 option will disable the drop-down menus and so forth. So please use the paste option every time that you're pasting anything into the data report. Use the paste values options, please. Data quality. The data report itself has a data report instructions tab, and it's in the data report, and it's immediately available resource if questions arise. So I'll point that out where that tab is on the data report, but it really, if a question arises, I think it's a very helpful tool. Again, immediately available to you just by clicking on a different tab within the data report. And if that doesn't answer your question, some of the other resources on the technical assistance page may. Additional data reporting tools are available and will be made available by your grant manager, including the data collection tool and a data quality guide. Real briefly, the data collection tool is a tool that's that can be used if it's helpful to your organization, and it's basically a staging tool where you can first take your data, paste it into the data collection tool. That will help format it. It helps to keep records. It allows a link between a youth's name and the youth ID. So depending on your organization's existing capacity for data collection, the data tool may be useful. And then there will be a data quality guide that will show you some of the tricks to review your data before submission. It's the same things that the grant managers will be using to check various checks for data quality. And then if you find that nothing's answering your question or the question is particularly challenging, please use your grant manager as a resource. We're happy to help, and in fact would much prefer to address questions prior to submission of the data report, as opposed to addressing problems within the data report after submission. So please do utilize your grant manager as a resource. All right, now I am going to demo some actual data reporting. And again, for each quarter, what will happen is I've staged the data reports, and I'll go through a progression of data reporting as if we were replicating quarterly data reporting. I'll see if this works, if I can slide this over to the shared screen. Can somebody give me a thumbs up? I can't see what's being shared. Is the data report excellent? Thank you both. And Angela, I appreciate it. The first thing we'll do is look at.
Hey, Bill, would you mind making it a little bit bigger so people can see it on their screen a little? Just increase the size. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. So what we'll review first are the column headers. These are, as you can see, blue is a required field. So first we have the youth ID field. This is where you assign a unique identifier to a youth. A couple caveats here. One is do not use driver's license, social security numbers, or an ODE identifier that's called the secure student identifier, or the SSID. The point is we want youth to remain anonymous, so we can't use an ID that's otherwise associated with that youth. So you can use your internal IDs as long as they're not social security numbers. The convention I'm using here for sake of demonstration is any youth entered in the quarter 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 will start with the number of the quarter. So as you can see, in quarter 1, 5 youth have been entered. I'm jumping ahead. Sorry, I'll continue to go through the column headers. Next is gender. And then a change for this year is the way that race ethnicity is being reported. Instead of a drop-down menu to select that, we now have race and gender as what's called flags, simply yes, no responses. You can see that if I click into the drop down, it's a yes, no response. Please fill in, do not leave these blanks. And there are some tricks to being able to complete them faster. For example, if you just populate the yeses that apply, you can then sort and rapidly put in no's for the rest of them. You'll see then the race ethnicity columns are the traditional race ethnicity of the federal government, because ultimately the ed data is rolled up into the federal requirements. The next column header is date of birth, and that's also required. Then we have the enrollment start category, and these are the program start date and program end dates. Then we have characteristics at start, educational status, employment status, and educational status at end and employment status at end. As we continue, we'll move into the yellow. We've expanded our optional fields. The yellow indicates that they're optional. We've added an optional gender column because we just wanted to expand the possibility for expression there. As you can see, there are numerous drop-down menu options to more fully complement the required gender column. It is also, this is, because it's an optional column, you may also override the drop-down menu here. So you can literally enter anything that's appropriate and makes sense in the optional gender column. In much the same way, the optional race ethnicity column can be used to more fully complement. For example, here, this youth would, if we backtrack, would have indicated their Native American and then further perhaps a tribal affiliation, and in this case, Cayuse. But it could also apply to organizations that might be serving immigrants and maybe those coming from Africa. So our Black African American column it may not do that justice in its totality. You could enter a specific country here, for example, if that was something you'd want to do. Completely optional again. Also new for this biennium is the optional columns for pre and post test. Based on a data survey that was conducted last biennium, it came to our awareness that many organizations conduct some type of pre and post test assessment. It could be even a single assessment done at different points in time. It doesn't necessarily have to be pre and post, but this could be like a sense of belonging inventory or social emotional learning inventory. But as you can see here, say discuss options with your grant manager. What we want to do is provide some columns that allow organizations to report maybe a tool they're using internally. So if you are using one of those, please discuss with your grant manager. So I would love to have the ability for you to report that data. So those are the columns. We'll get back to data entry. 5 youth in Q1 were reported. I will scroll over to the program start date, draw your attention to the 7/1/23 start dates. This tells me that those 4 youth were active at the start of the biennium. This is important because some organizations may have been working with a youth that will be receiving grant funded services for many years. In the past, sometimes we've seen, because maybe the data source that you're pulling from shows the start date when they started services with your organization, maybe 3 years ago. That date is used, but again, any date entered for start and end dates has to fall in the biennium. So for youth like that, they will receive the first day of the biennium start date. The highlighted cell here is a youth that joined, started services later in the quarter. And you can see again, a check here shows it's a 9-1, so it is in Q1. The area that corresponds to the start date are the youth characteristics at program start, educational status, and employment status. This is where you enter the grade or appropriate educational programming that they're in. And then employment status is also completed. And you can see here that this is one of the few columns that has an unknown as an option. Frankly, employment status may not be relevant to some programs and very relevant to other programs. So for example, if you're doing third grade reading literacy program, you know, we don't expect for those youth to be employed. So perhaps a lot of not employeds will be used there. So this is what Q1 data report would look like. In Q2, get this up to a bigger size. Again, following the two-step process. The first step is entering youth that started receiving services in Q2. You can see that those have been added to the end of the first available row, empty row in the data report. All of the Q1 youth remain as is. And I'll back up here. You can see all of the data has been entered. We'll skip through that redundancy and move to the dates. As you can see here, there's a variety of start dates for these youth. That tells me they're joining at various times during the quarter. This cell is highlighted because we've had a youth that stopped receiving services. A youth could stop receiving services for multiple reasons. They may move to Florida to live with their grandparents or something that would receive an end date. They may complete programming, they may graduate, they may just stop showing up and don't really know what they are, what's happened. But anyway, when something to that effect does happen, enter a date that corresponds to their last day of service. When that date is entered, this is the end dating process. Anytime an end date is entered, it requires entering the status at end. And what I would draw your attention to is how this is going to be interpreted. The youth started at the beginning of the biennium and then left or stopped receiving grant-related services towards the end of Q2. You can see then that that time span doesn't cover a whole year. So their status at start was 9th grade and they were in a paid internship. We would expect that because it's a mid-year drop, that their grade level stays the same and that anything could happen in terms of their employment status. By way of example, in this case, it looked like this tells me they progressed from a paid internship to full-time employment. This youth now, because it has an end date, in this data report is no longer active in Q2. You can see again that the optional columns have been filled out. So we'll keep moving right along. In Q3, now the same process unfolds. Again, the mantra is to first step, add youth that began receiving services. Again, you can see 5 youth were added. And I've highlighted this youth because, as you can see, it is a repeating youth ID. What that tells me is that a youth that had started or received services earlier in the quarter and or earlier in the biennium had been dropped, has now returned. And this is evidenced by the program start date. What you can see here is that their program end date was 12/22. They're assigned a new start date and also assigned new status at start, whatever that may be. In this case, it's still the same school year. The grade level has stayed the same. And this time, when they return, they're not employed. So this is an example of what it looks like when a youth has multiple service periods. The same youth ID is used. If we checked as your data, as your grant managers will, we would expect that every variable is likely the same. So, the race, ethnicities, the gender, the birth date would all be the same. If we look and find a discrepancy there, that's something the grant manager would draw your attention to and ask a question about. Moving right along as we get to Q4, the same process unfolds. And as you'll recall, the Q4 data report is also the annual data report. So in Q4, you can see 2 youth have been added. And as the dates check out, in fact, it is in Q4. And the step 2 is to end date. 2 additional youth have been end dated in Q4. And again, looking at when the end date occurred corresponds with how the progression is shown. The end date status is filled out. It's during the same school year, so the grade remains the same. And in similar fashion, it looks like this youth stopped receiving services right at the tail end of the school year, and therefore the grade level is also the same. What I'm now going to show you is at this juncture, the annual data report practice of end dating all active youth will unfold, because now the first 2 steps have been followed. Now we end date the remaining active youth. I'll blow this up. And what you can see here is the yellow represent youth that had been dropped during the first 4 quarters. And so those remain the same. Those dates do not get overridden. You can see that every other youth has been assigned the 6/30 end date, except for the 1 youth that was added in Q4 has a 6/8 end date. Because this is happening during the summer or after the school year is over, you'll now see that the status, education status at end date, unlike those youth that dropped during the school year, they're now showing a progression between grades. So that's the convention that we ask that you use, just like, you know, when you graduated 8th grade, you were a freshman in high school. You know, I still remember that day, type of thing. So that's the convention. If they drop after the school, once assigned an end date, after the school year is over, show the grade progression. So what the anticipated grade they'll be in next year. I would also draw your attention to the 2 youth that were added in Q4. Both of them were in 12th grade. The status here shows me that one is continuing their education and that one graduated. So now that has been done, and this is the Q4 data report that would be submitted. I'm gonna speed this up as quickly as possible. Now in Q5, this is what the data report from Q4. So I have not added any youth in Q5 yet. And I'm gonna show you a process of how to start Q5 reporting in real time. So what this shows me here is here's my dates. The beginning of Q5 and the end of Q4 are literally the borders, you know, one's one day and then one's the next day. I'm going to use a sort feature up here and sort from oldest to newest. What you can see here is that it shows me the end dated youth, and also draw your attention to the fact I'm not going to copy this youth into the Q5 data report because they've graduated. And just by way of example, that's a youth that may not, even though they were active, you know, they may not continue in the programming because they're off to college or something like that. So then we have these rows here. I'll just demonstrate what can be done. Every one of these cells can be copied over and copy them through. Wow, it goes fast. Copy them through the date of birth. And does anybody remember what paste option I'm supposed to use here? Yes, 1, 2, 3, paste values. And what that does is populate exactly those youth that are returning in Q5 that were active in Q4. These youth will now be assigned a 7/1/24, start date. You can see that will change it and format it. Again, this can be copied, entered in for every one of these youth. Again, use the paste 1, 2, 3 values. And here's a tip. Because they're literally within a 24-hour period, it's highly likely that their status at end will also be their status at start. So again, I'm going to take the youth that apply, just copy their status at end, copy that and move it over. And again, paste values 1, 2, 3. And this also shows what I mean by stripping the formatting. Notice that it didn't carry over the color or the highlighting or anything else. It's just very clean and doesn't mess with any of the formatting within the data report. So now you have, I've just showed you an example. This is the prep. This is the first thing you would do for Q5. We'll move over. This is an example of what it looks like. After that, I add 2 youth that started at a later time in Q5. You can see that those dates are not 7/1, but different dates in the Q5 reporting window. And so you, in addition to bringing in the youth that are staying active as across the biennium, add new youth, and then end date any youth that happen to drop. For sake of time, we'll move straight to Q6. What's interesting is 1 youth in Q6, and this is literally, again, may happen because it's cumulative. If no youth joined, if you're running a cohort model and any quarter youth didn't join, that's step 1. The data report doesn't need to be touched at that point in terms of adding a youth. The second step would be to end date youth. If no youth end dated, the data report will be exactly the same as the previous quarter. There's no reason to do anything. What you'll note here is that youth 1001 is back again. And I'll show you something else that can be done. I am now going to sort by youth ID. And what you can see is that it has now bunched all the similar IDs together. And so you can see that this youth 1001 has 4 periods of service through Q6. I can look, yep, sure enough, it appears to be the same youth. All of the characteristics are the same, including date of birth. And now you can see a progression with the, each successive end date is follows in chronological order. The row that doesn't have an end date is their active row, which is their Q6. You can see the grade progression has followed. The various conventions that we talked about. And that wraps up the data report. So this is an example of reporting through Q6, and Q7 will be exactly the same, and Q8 then reverts to the same as Q4 in terms of the end dating process. At this time, we have a couple minutes left for Q&A, and I think we'll just open it up and go from there. If it takes us past the hour, you're welcome to leave or stay as you would prefer.